All right, everybody, welcome back to the Horn Takes podcast. It's week 10 of college football. This is episode 5, and we got a special treat for you guys today. We got Mike Roach, recruiting analyst from Horns247. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into the recruiting game, and how long you've been doing this?
I kind of got in just by reading about it. I was a member of Orange Bloods forever as in my 20s, and have always enjoyed recruiting and any kind of player acquisition, actually. I was really into the draft, just basically how you go about building a roster is always fascinating to me. And also growing up in Texas, we love our high school football. So I would go to games just randomly anyways, because I enjoyed going to games. And I was working another job, and I told my wife, I used to write some stuff, and she said, well, why don't you write again? Like, you need to be employed by anybody to write. You can write whatever you want. And so I started doing that. I got picked up by a site called Horn Sports, and they wanted me more to focus on the team. So I spent a year on the beat with the Texas team in the last year of Charlie Strong, which was not the best year to be on that beat. Because I missed, I didn't get credentialed in time for the Notre Dame game that year, which was obviously the high point. And then, I certainly got sent to Lawrence to watch them lose to Kansas. So it was an up and down experience. It was cool, but it was also, it was draining on me working a full-time job. And so I said to them, hey, can I just do recruiting? I'd like to go to high school games, talk to the kids, do that kind of stuff. And anybody who works in the recruiting world will tell you, it's a sickness. You really have to love it, and you really have to be kind of addicted to that part of it, because it's a grind 24/7 really is with no pun intended. So I worked my way up to being a part-time employee at 24/7, and then an opportunity opened for me, and I've just kind of gone from there. And I tell people I get to wake up and worry about high school football every day. It's a pretty great way to go about life.
Yeah, you're definitely living the dream. And for those of you that don't know, Mike goes to high school games all across the state of Texas all the time. And we'll talk a little bit later about how you can follow him, how you can learn a little bit more about what he does, and to see his content and what he puts together for a lot of folks as far as high school football recruiting for the state of Texas and really across the nation, I think. Really, you focus on Texas Longhorn recruiting mostly, correct?
Yeah, I do, but I am out so much that I see a lot of kids around our state. I get to know a lot of kids around our state that are going, other places. And I try to help out our other sites when I can, because I am one of the guys in our network that probably hits the road the most and has seen the most kids. So at least in the state of Texas, if we've got a kid that's maybe going to Oregon State, they don't get down here. Their guys don't get down here a lot to cover. So right. I can help them out with something like that. And that's part of what I really enjoy about it, is just kind of, helping showcase our kids in the state of Texas and getting them to college.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit of Texas recruiting. Texas's 2023 class is just about set. I think there's 21 commits today. How many more guys do you think Steve Sarkisian's looking to take with this class?
I think it's, even with the ruling recently that they've kind of eliminated limits on class sizes, and there's no longer a hard cap on what you can sign. I still think this class is probably close to done. Just if you look at kind of the way the board's whittled down, there haven't been a ton of new offers going out. I think they're probably looking to they take Deuce Robinson at tight end. They'd take another receiver. They'd probably take 2 defensive linemen. They'd take another linebacker if they had the right one, and maybe 1 or 2 defensive backs. So, you're talking about 5-6 guys left in this class. And they filled it up really quickly, and now it's just kind of about closing strong with the remaining guys on the board, and also keeping your own.
Gotcha. Now, so you mentioned that there's not a lot of offers going out right now. Who are the guys, and you kind of mentioned a few names, would those be the guys you say that Texas is really recruiting strongly at this point? They're going after pretty hard at this point?
Yeah, at tight end, you have Deuce Robinson. At wide receiver, they're after DeAndre Moore Jr. from St. John Bosco in California. And also Jaden Greathouse, the Austin Westlake kid who's a Notre Dame commit's going to make a visit for the TCU game. On the defensive side of the ball, that's really kind of where it's heating up. They're after Colton Bosick, an Oklahoma commit from Westlake, a Texas legacy. His dad, Brian, played at Texas. And things I think are getting very interesting in that recruitment. And if Texas can flip him, I think he's potentially one of the 5 most impactful recruits in this class for them. That just with their need on the defensive line for edge rushers, a guy with his type of frame, 6'6", 140 pounds right about now, incredible length, and just a insanely good skill set. I think he is extremely important. And then also looking at some of those interior D-line guys, like Marcus Steele from Garland, Naaman Forest, Justin Benton, a kid they just offered from Georgia, who's a West Virginia commit. I think they're going to get him in for visit for the TCU game. That'll be big as well. He's got a little bit of Byron Murphy in his game. And then in the secondary, that's kind of where there are questions. I think that, at corner, they really like Javian Taviano. Just about every school in the country does. He's a nearly 5-star corner from Arlington Martin. But he's been kind of an enigma. And I think that for Texas, they would love to see him get back on campus before they can feel really confident. He hasn't been on campus, I don't believe, since January. So they would love to get him back for a visit to feel a little more confident about that one.
Yeah, you mentioned Vosick out of Austin Westlake, and it made me think of something that Texas has had a big issue with, for a really long time now, is just elite pass rushers off the edge. You look at the team last year, you look at the team this year. This year, the pressure is all coming up the middle. There's very little pressure coming off the edge. Last year, there was almost no pressure anywhere. Why do you think it's so hard to find elite pass rushers at a high school?
For one, I think that you can find guys from the edge that can rush the passer, but what Texas really wants are NFL-type bodies that have incredible length, twitch, all those types of things, and those are hard to find. Those guys are kind of unicorns in a way. And when they do emerge, the best of the best in the country go after them. I mean, those guys are going to Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State and places like that. So I think year after year, they just haven't hit that position. I mean, if you remember, like under Mac, it seemed like every year it was like, okay, Tim Crowder and Brian Robinson are gone. Well, here comes Brian Arakpo. Brian Arakpo's gone. Well, here's Sergio Kendall. Sergio Kendall's gone. Here's Alex Okafor. I mean, it was just, they would line them up year after year. And about in the early part of the last decade, it seemed like they just kind of hit a dry spell. And outside of, a guy like Joseph Asai or somebody like that, they've really had issues finding those big bodies. And so I think it's about finding guys who you can see the traits in and then hope you can develop them.
All right. So looking at this class right now and just the guys that are committed, who do you think is going to be the surprise commit out of this class? Like the guy that has the most impact that maybe a lot of people aren't expecting to have a big impact at Texas? Or I guess everybody expects people to have a big impact, but maybe one of those lesser guys that folks look at and go, yeah, we love to have him, but we're not expecting him to step in immediately and play. Kind of like an Ethan Burke almost, like a guy that, as when he got recruited to Michigan, he's like a lacrosse player that just Michigan grabbed him up, probably because of his size and length. Then they were able to flip him at Texas. I don't think many people thought he'd play all that much, and he's played quite a bit of football this year for Texas. Who's that guy in this 2023 class?
Yeah, and Vosick is kind of the upgraded version of Ethan Burke. I mean, they played on those twin ends for Westlake State title team and were just terrifying. Vosick is the more completed version, a guy that's been playing football longer, a guy that's been learning under his dad, who is the defensive line coach at Westlake, and I would say probably one of the best defensive line coaches in the state of Texas. I mean, what you've seen from Ethan, and the reason he's been able to play so early, their technique is so good and their hands are so good that it's been able to get him on the field. And I think that's the same with Vosick. The guy in this class that I really like, who's already committed, is Leon Olifau, the linebacker from Hawaii. He's a guy that doesn't get talked about a ton, but if you talk to people at Texas, they love him. I mean, they think he is an elite linebacker target. They think if he were in Texas, he would probably be right there with Anthony Hill at Denton Ryan for linebacker targets in the state. I think he's a guy, and he's a mid-year enrollee, supposed to be graduating early, that if they can hold on to and sign, he's got a lot of schools coming after him. Oregon and Tennessee are throwing the house at him right now. But if they can hold on to him and sign him, he's a guy they think could come in and play almost immediately. I don't. The Justin Benton kid that I mentioned earlier, the West Virginia commit, he's had a really weird high school career because he had a really strong freshman season. His sophomore season was kind of wiped out by COVID. His junior season, he transferred to IMG and kind of has been back and forth. And then now he's come back in senior year. He's been incredibly productive. So that's a guy that I think, if they're able to get him, could be, kind of a surprise type of player.
All right. Well, you just talked about a lot of needs for this program. Linebacker is certainly a need where we need a lot of depth at the University of Texas. I think Ford is a really good linebacker. Overshown's a really good linebacker. But if you look past that, there's not a lot of guys that have played a lot, and there's not a lot of guys that produced a lot. All that being said, looking at this 2023 class, do you feel like what are those areas that Sark needed to fill, and do you feel like this class sort of gets those guys in the program? Are we starting to build depth in those key areas where we need to build depth? You look at the class last year, offensive line and defensive line. Anybody that knew anything about football was watching that team and going, we have got to get some guys on the offensive line. We got to get some guys on the defensive line. He did that. Is he doing that in this 2023 class?
Yeah, I think so. They're continuing to build up front, especially on the offensive line. It's a different type of class than the signed last year. Last year was a really high-profile class. You get 5 stars in Kelvin Banks and Devon Campbell, and then some really high 4-star guys like Nato Omeozulu and Cole Hudson and guys like that. So this class has been more about, they've got 5 commits on the O-line. Those guys are more what I would call a little bit longer-term projects, but they're all guys with tremendous size and athleticism. And I think you can afford to do that with the class you took last year. You can afford, you're not hoping that any of these guys from this class have to come right in and start like you were with Kelvin Banks. So you can afford to let that trajectory play out a little bit. Outside of the offensive line position, I think they've done a really good job at linebacker this year. The receiver class is one that I would like to see them add another dynamic playmaker in. I think that offense, just add as many playmakers as you can to it and let it go. And then running back group, they're with Cedric Baxter from Edgewater High School in Orlando committed. He's a guy that I think is in the argument for the number 1 running back in this class. He is that good. He is a guy that if you talk to people around the program, almost even more so than Arch Manning, they are excited about this kid and what he can do, his projection, and a guy they think can come in and take that job right away if Bijan Robinson goes to the NFL.
You said Arch Manning's name. That's kind of the key prospect or the key commit for this class this year. Everybody thought there was going to be a lot of big momentum in recruiting after they got Arch to commit. Do you feel like we really saw that? Do you feel like there was a lot of change? I know as soon as he committed, there was a couple of commits in the next week or the next week and a half or so, but after that, it seems to have faded away pretty quickly. Is that something we expected, or is that kind of an anomaly?
I think they got their guys they were going to get from the momentum push with Arch. I mean, Jonte Cook was going to be in this class probably regardless. I mean, he committed pretty quickly after Arch did, but Jonte had been working on his commitment video for weeks before that. I mean, he had called me from a visit in Oregon weeks before that and said, hey, can you do the voice over on my commitment video? So that was kind of always in the plans. I think what you've seen from Arch is they've been able to get into the picture for some guys nationally that they normally wouldn't be. When you talk, especially Deuce Robinson, who I keep bringing up, who is a elite tight end from Phoenix, a guy that wasn't considering Texas at all, but when Arch committed has been working on him really hard. I think Arch has also been really hard on Colton Vosick. I mean, when Vosick visited for the Iowa State game, I talked to a source at Texas who said, yeah, I mean, Arch was just attached to his hip pocket the entire weekend. And so there was a momentum bump. I think the thing is this class just filled up so quickly in the summer that it seems like there's a lack of momentum now, right? Because nothing's happening, but they kind of checked a ton of boxes at that point. And now it's just about finishing off. And there's kids who are always going to want to wait till late in the cycle to make their decisions regardless. And that's kind of where they are now.
Gotcha. So we talked about the 2022 class, was the top 5 class. This class right now is a top 5 class. Texas still a little bit better this year on the field, but still struggling in certain areas. We see a little bit of what we saw last year a lot, but we see it a little bit this year with this team. How long do you think, and you've been doing this for years now, and you've probably seen it, but how long do you think Sark can keep that recruiting momentum going where we're signing these top 5 type, elite classes without putting that product on the field and turning it around and starting to win more games?
He got some benefit of the doubt last year, and even with the 5-7 season, was able to sign that class that he signed. I think he'll get a little bit of leniency this year from kids, but man, they've got to win. They've got to start producing results on the field, or else you're back in the same cycle they've been in, where other schools are negatively recruiting you based on his, kind of status and his job security, and then you're talking about potentially another coaching change. And it's just kind of a nasty cycle that, unfortunately, since I've been covering the team, I feel like I've just been stuck in. So I think they've got to win. This 4-game stretch coming up, I think, is as important a 4-game stretch as this program has had in the last decade. They've got to, I think 8-4 has to be the basement for this team. If anything less than that, and then you're starting to really drift into dangerous waters there.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity in these next 4 games for the team to get a bunch of monkeys off their back. And if they don't hurry up and do that, I think all Texas fans are afraid that recruiting momentum is going to go away. And we all know coaching matters, but if you don't have the players, it's really hard to win a lot of football games. Let's switch gears a little bit. Mr. Mike Roach has written a book here very recently. It's called The Road to Texas, Incredible Twists and Improbable Turns Along the Texas Longhorns Recruiting Trail. Talk to us a little bit about this book.
Yeah, it's up on my shelf right there. It was a opportunity that was brought to me by the people at Triumph Books. They reached out to me and said, hey, we have this series going. We've done Michigan. We've done Georgia. We've done Alabama. We would like somebody to write some of these stories about Texas. And they pitched me the idea of talking to some of the great players in Texas history and kind of about their recruitments and how they got to Texas. And so I took it on because I was like, hey, who wouldn't want to write a book? That seems like a cool deal. And then got into it and was like, what have I done? And last year was really tough because I was trying to write the book while covering that class. And I had this looming deadline and March 1st to turn everything in. And in like December at state championships, I'd probably done 10% of the book. And was like seriously having panic attacks in the AT&T press box thinking about it. But we got it in. I lined up a bunch of interviews, talked to a lot of guys. I think we have some cool stories in there, and that's kind of what it's about. It's not anything salacious about recruiting. It's a lot of the feel good stories about what made a guy choose Texas. So we talked to, I think the biggest name we probably have in there is Derek Johnson, who for me personally was a huge get when I got him. BJ Johnson was a guy that when he played at South Grand Prairie in high school, I grew up in Irving, just 5 miles from where he played. And I told him when I interviewed him, you were like a mythical figure to us because that was before the widespread internet stuff where you would see guys, you would just read about what BJ Johnson had done to some poor team that last Friday night. And so like getting him was really cool. We talked to Quan Cosby, Roy Miller, Aaron Williams, Michael Huff, a lot of guys from the MAC era. We talked a lot about national championships. My one regret, I guess not regret, but like I wish I could have gotten, maybe one of the bigger name guys. I really wanted what I call like the Mount Rushmore kind of either Colt, Vince, Ricky, or Earl. And just it's really tough to get those guys to talk. Earl Campbell's family gave me a very nice, polite no, thank you. And then trying to get in touch with Vince Young was an adventure. I even had like players I was interviewing for the book like call him and be like, please do this book. And it was like, yeah, just talk to my people, and the people were not very receptive. But I still think it comes out great. There's a lot of fun stories in there, and I think it's a good, fun read, and that was kind of my goal with it.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. What's your favorite story from the book?
There's a few. I really like. I talked to Rod Wright, who went to the Texas OU game as a recruit. His I guess it would have been his junior season, and saw Texas lose and talks about how, normally you would go to that situation, and if you're considering both of those teams, maybe you come out of that going, well, I'm going to Oklahoma. But what he saw was Texas was close enough and just a few pieces away that he decided he wanted to be one of those few pieces, go to Texas instead. I think Michael Huff has an incredible story. It's so funny because I knew Huff kind of tangentially. We both grew up in Irving. He played at Nimitz. I went to Irving High. He was coached by like my best friend's dad, but still getting in touch with him was a little tough. And then once I did and pitched him the idea, his thing was like, well, I mean, why do you want to talk to me? I was just like a 2-star recruit who like nobody wanted. And I got a scholarship at the end. And I was like, that's the most interesting story. Like nobody cares to me. Like the Sam Ellinger story has been told a lot, but I mean, I didn't want the guys who were like, hey, I grew up a Texas fan. I got a Texas offer, so I went to Texas. I wanted, the stories of guys who were improbable to get there. Michael Huff he was 2 years ahead of me in high school, so I saw him play a lot. He was a track star who was going to probably go to college on a track scholarship. And my buddy's dad, who was a secondary coach, called Texas up and said, hey, I've got a kid. I think if you get him in your program and he'll do all the right things and he'll be a really productive player for you. And then it turns out he becomes a Thorpe Award winner and a first-round draft pick. I think those are, to me, the interesting stories. And, rankings and all recruiting was so different back then. I think had we known, if Michael Huff came out right now, Michael Huff would probably be a close to 5-star prospect because of the way we evaluate players right now. We look for guys height, weight, and speed, and he had all of those things. He played in a wing T team. He wasn't asked to do a lot defensively, and he will even admit, I wasn't a very physical player. I didn't tackle. I didn't like to tackle. And so when he got to Texas, that was his goal. He said he spent days at the sand pit with Dwayne Aquina just tackling dummies and learning how to tackle and became one of the best tacklers on the team. So that story, I think, is really cool to me. It's got a personal touch, just him being from Irving. So.
Yeah, that is a lot of awesome insight. I had no idea. I had no idea about Huff's story whatsoever. I would have assumed Huff was a 5-star guy out of high school. So that's really cool. I'm sure the book is full of all kinds of stories just like that, but were there any stories that didn't make it into the book?
Yeah. There was some fun, like this coach offered me money, this big name coach who like everybody would know had I printed it, like locked me in a room and asked me how much money it would take to get him to his school. And I just, I don't want to deal with lawsuits for accusing somebody of that. So there were some fun stories there. I think I almost wrote this the week of the OU game because I used a lot of content from the book the week of the OU game, because one of the key points I talked to a lot of the guys about was, what was your experience like in the OU game? What makes that game special? What stands out about it? All those types of things. So I had a lot of great quotes, and I wrote some stuff about these former players look back on their OU experience. And I didn't write it, but Quan Cosby talked about when he originally had committed to Texas and then went to play baseball. He came back and was deciding between Texas and Oklahoma on his second recruitment. And when he picked Texas again, he said Brent Venables just went nuts on him, just told him it was the worst decision of his life. He was going to regret it, all these things. And I almost wrote it during the OU week, and I didn't want to create a storm for Quan after he had done the book and kind of stir things up that week. But I thought that was kind of funny. And then Quan even mentioned the last year he was there, which I think was 2008 when they beat Oklahoma 45-35. Venables caught him on the field afterwards and, told him, it looks like you made the right decision. Congratulations and everything. So kind of a fun ending.
Yeah, Quan's career turned out all right at Texas, right? So where can people pick up this book? I know I've seen it on Amazon, but is it any stores anywhere?
Yeah, it's on shelves at most major bookstores. Amazon's a great place to find it. Goodreads.com is another place to find it, or triumphbooks.com. That's the publisher. They did a great job through the whole process of kind of helping me navigate something I had never done, which was write a book. And so I think it was a great way for me to kind of get my feet wet. I've already got the funny thing was, when I finished the book, I would write mostly at night. And I would really at the end, down the stretch, I was writing till 4 or 5 a.m. every night. And most of those nights I was coming to bed about the time my wife was getting up for work. And I remember the night I finished everything and I walked in and she was getting up and getting dressed. And I just said, I'm done and I'm never doing this again. Like this has been such a stressful thing. And then like the next day I texted her and I was like, I got an idea for my second book. So I've got some things brewing for a part 2 project. It's not necessarily going to be Texas centric, but I think could be a really cool project if I can make it come together. I've been working on that, but yeah, it's been a really fun experience. Something I never thought I'd get to do.
Awesome. Well, you got me excited about this book. I'm definitely going to go grab it and read it. You guys listening, you guys should check it out too if you're interested in recruiting at all. Is it too early for a prediction on the Little Apple game or the game up in Little Apple? I know you write stuff for Horns247. I don't want to ruin any of that. What do you think about that game?
I don't know when this podcast is going up, but I think our predictions have already been published. So I think I'm safe saying, and this is where I always get into trouble because I write a prediction every week and then I'll do podcasts and I'll be like, well, what's your prediction? And then if I give something different, it's obviously, so I've got to remember what I wrote.
Well, don't worry about it. Only like 5 people listen to this podcast right now. So you're good.
We're trying to up that number though.
Right,
to up that number. I don't feel great about this pick, but I've got Texas 27-24 in this game. I think it's a must win. I think they've got to come out like kind of a wounded animal a little bit. And I'm hoping that, they get a bounce back from Quinn Ewers in this game. And, I think covering Quinn in high school, I was probably as close to Quinn as anybody out there. I had known Quinn since he was an 8th grader. I saw him throw in 8th grade at a 7-on-7 tournament. And I turned around to like whoever the person next to me was, and I was like, "That kid's the number 1 quarterback in the country in his class." Like, I don't need to see anymore. I don't need to see who else is in it. Like, he's that good, and he's kind of proven to be that good. But I think a lot of people are forgetting, even with young quarterbacks, even as talented as they are, they have their ups and downs. They have their learning experiences, and I think that's what the last couple of weeks have been for Quinn. And so I think maybe we're in store for a bounce back week from him. I think he is so good and so talented that, when he's going and going at a high level, they're getting the ball to Bijan, they're pretty unstoppable. So I'm going to lean on that and have Texas by 3.
It is incredible how close our score prediction is on this game. And it's not close. It's the exact same score. But we'll talk. I'll be talking about that on a different podcast. Mike Roach, recruiting analyst for Horns247. I really appreciate you coming on today. I hope I can get you back on here because I could probably talk to you for 10 hours about just that book alone. I'm sure there's all kinds of other stuff that you could talk about that could pique my interest. Thanks for coming on the show. You guys have a good day.
Anytime you're down, if I can make it work with my schedule, I'd love to come on and do whatever can. I love sitting and just talking ball with anybody. So I came across your TikToks a while ago, and then you had kind of reached out and said, "Hey, I got this idea for a podcast," and I said, "Let me know." And then nothing ever happened.
Yeah.
And then I saw a TikTok where you're like, "Hey, the podcast is coming." So I think I sent you the eyes emoji in the comment.
Yeah, man. I was going to do a Big 12.
Get ready.
I was going to do a Big 12 podcast, and like a week later, the news came out that Texas and OU were jumping to the SEC. Well, I was like, shit, there goes that idea. So anyway, yeah, man, thanks for coming on the show. I'll definitely reach out. We'll do it again. And I'm going to go ahead and end the podcast here because we spent a lot of time talking about recruiting, which I love. You guys have a good one.